My name is Gladys M. Alex, and I'm originally from Montana and have been living in Martinez since 1971. My husband and I he was transferred here, and I came to the last tour, and everything we had to do was Shell, and it was just fascinating. I got to go inside the computer room, and I was just overwhelmed with the layout of all the pipes and everything. And then my son married Susan Roman, and her dad is Anthony Roman, who's worked for Shell for 43 years. And then their son, Alfred Roman, also worked for Shell. And when the accident happened from Yuba City, Tony Anthony was working at Shell, and then he went and got the crane and helped with all that. And he's pictured there in the newspaper with the crane. And he did everything he could for that.
What accident was that?
That was the one, the bus over the ramp. Yeah, the bus accident.
So he borrowed the crane.
Yeah, because he was working for Shell. So then he just went and got the crane and helped. And then so he helped all with that day. And then the engineer, Mr. Leeds, who lived in Moraga. Well, I don't know what year this was. But, and I personally have never met him, but he's one of 7 sons from Havre, Montana, and his brother, I just found out now, was Dr. Leeds, Robert Leeds, and they were brothers, and this doctor was my family doctor all the time I grew up.
You have all these connections.
And I was just, when I found out, I said, you mean this little town of Havre is a little farming community, and he was, I think, the youngest of the 7 sons, this Mr. Leeds, who was the engineer here, and I said, well, how did you get, he lived in Moraga, how did you get to Moraga? And I think his one son still lives right in this area, but that just fascinated me because we're very rural in Montana, and to come down to here and work with Shell just fascinated me. And then another farmer from from the little town that I'm from, which has only got 7 people in the proper, his name was Harlan Crafts, and then he is also a farmer, but he also drills wells, and he came over to Shell here and did something with the water system just a few years, maybe let's say 20 years back.
From that little town?
The little town of Hoagland, Montana, which now only has 7 people in it, but Havre's got about 10,000, where Dr. Leeds' family, where Mr. Leeds, the engineer, was from. And they were all raised on a farm, all farm boys.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's just amazing connections from that little town,
that
and
little
surrounding area.
Right, and that little town. Well, when my this man that did something with the water over here, Harlan Krause was his name, and he said, I was just at Martinez. I said, what would you be doing in Martinez with this water? And so whatever he did with the water there.
Oh, darn.
It's just amazing.
It is. And you're very interested in history, huh?
Very interested in history. And as I've gotten older, I'm from the farm, and we still have my dad's family homestead, and then my other grandparents' homestead too, but it's in another family, not our personal family. But no, I'm very interested in history, and we still have family reunions going clear back to Norway.
Oh,
We go back and forth all the time. People do.
Oh my heavens!
But Martinez, I really became. Well, when we moved here, I was fascinated with Martinez because it was very country. It was still just a 2-lane road, and then my children got to go up where Fountainhead is up there, where those cluster homes are, and that was open, and the kids could build up in those hills, take their wagon and just build.
So they had a wonderful childhood.
Yes, Martinez and the boys club. My son was very involved in the boys club. He was 187 boxes of candy he sold for them one year. And then he would go down and fish off the ferry, that pier down there when the ferry was still sitting there, and a nice bunch of people there. And I would take him down there. He had his little heater to heat up his sandwich. I never worried about him ever.
Yes, that's true. I've heard that from many people. Very safe and very
Very
lovely.
safe. Yes, very, very.
All right, well, thank you, Gladys.
Well, thank
very
you.
much.
This is just an unbelievable experience.
Okay, good.
Robert Sari. I started at Shell working on summer jobs while I was going to college. First job I had the first day was pulling weeds on the side of the hill there where the old office used to be. And then worked as a gauger for a summer, and then worked on the compound house for a summer, and then it became a real job after finishing college. Ended up in the lab for 18 years, and then went on from there. They were going to build a flexi-corker, and they needed some people in safety. I worked at safety for about 4 years here at Shell, and then got transferred over to Criterion Catalyst to be the safety supervisor over Criterion. So I had 31 years with Shell and Criterion, and retired when I was about 57, and been retired at 15 years.
And I know Shell did a lot of things for the families of Shell employees. Did you participate in any of those, your children, your wife?
We played, yeah, they had softball teams, things like that. One of the good things is working shift work was the fact that every third week you'd get 3.5 days off, so we camped everywhere in California for about 20 years during that period of time, so that was great. When I went out to Criterion, I ended up working days and was able to be at all this baseball and softball games of my son and daughter. And
Did you coach them on those?
I coached for years out there, so I was able to do that. And one of the secret things to do when you're working for Shell is get somebody that can replace you so you can be off when you needed to be.
So you found that person?
Yes, always. Lived in Martinez all my life, and Shell's been a good neighbor. And now our son is working at Shell here in Martinez in the planning department.
That's Brian.
Brian,
Sorry.
yes.
Hi, my name is Redmond O'Colonies. Real name is Redmond O'Connell. I'm a proud Martesian, recently returned after 10 years of wandering and wondering. And after those 10 years, I said, I have to come back home. My first connection with Martinez was a very indirect connection because I'm living in San Francisco. I love living in San Francisco. I thought I'd never ever leave San Francisco. But one day I'm out exploring on a Sunday. I love to just go and get lost. And we went over some bridge somewhere from San Francisco, and then we went through some tunnel somewhere. But then eventually we find ourselves in this beautiful space, stunningly beautiful. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I love living in San Francisco. I'll never leave San Francisco, but just in case, I'll have to remember this place. So fast forward many years, 1988, and I'm working on a project here in Martinez. I also know that I have to vacate my house in San Francisco within 6 months because it's going to be going on the market. And I'm working with Jim Ocean, one of the movers and shakers that came through Martinez. And I told him that I'm going to have to move. And without even thinking, I said, you know, I think I'd like to move to Martinez. And he said, oh yeah, I'll help you find a place. And I said, well, I've still got 6 months left of my lease. But 2 weeks later, he calls me. So I phoned my landlord and I said, would you let me out of the lease? And he said, sure. So in a very quick move, I'm suddenly in Martinez. And I'm already liking it. I mean, that turned into a very special and strong feeling that came up through the soles of my feet and pulled me down. I love living in Martinez, but the cream on the icing on the cake is that one day I'm out exploring from Martinez, and suddenly I'm out in that beautiful space again that I found on that day when I was exploring from Martinez. It's Briones Park. It's the most beautiful part of the world, and it's on our doorstep. So it's just great to be back here after 10 years of wandering and wondering. I'm home, and there's something, that strong feeling is still coming up through my feet and pulling me down.
And didn't you used to be the town crier for Martinez?
I used to be the town crier of Martinez. I still am the Contra Costa County crier, and I'll be reinstating that this very coming week. Once a year I work for the Contra Costa County Council, which makes me the Cocoa cocoa crier.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Jeff Staffelbach, and I worked for Shell Oil for over 37 years. Just retired a little over a year ago, and but my family moved here to Martinez in 1959, and in 1963, Mom and Dad bought the house out off of Tahoe Circle in the valley. And as a child, growing up out there, we would hike up Muir Road to this rock quarry, which is now Nob Hill Foods, and fly our kites in the rock quarry. And we would try to get them to go out over those big cement stacks over way yonder. Little did we know little did I know at that time that it was Shell Oil, and that I would be working there for over half my life so far. So, that was always fun, and I always looked at that. And also, my father was a school administrator here in Martinez, and so the people that he associated with and I associated with were all school people as a child. And so when somebody said that their folks were operators, I just figured they worked for the phone company. Little did I know that operators ran this refinery here in Martinez 24/7, forever. And it was something that I learned of later on. And I first came to work at Shell in 1973 as a laborer. Wanted to get into the maintenance shops, but the head of personnel, Bill Sharkey at that time,
Lovely man.
he said that I didn't have enough outside experience. So I worked here as a laborer for about 4 or 5 months, and then worked my first week of swing shift. And I thought to myself, well, I'm kind of young, I've got girlfriends, I bowl, play softball. I didn't want to work shift work. Well, luckily the next week I got a call from a machine shop in Berkeley, and I was hired there, worked there for 4 years, and then was helping a neighbor here in Martinez do some work. And one of his friends was a maintenance foreman for Shell Chemical, Walt Larson. And he liked the way I was working, and he asked me what I did, and I said, well, I'm a machinist. He said, Shell's hiring a machinist. So I went and talked to Bill Sharkey, took the test. Back in those days, the boss and the supervisor looked at the piece you made, and they said, when do you want to get hired, or when do you want to come to work? And I said, well, I'll give Parsons 2-week notice, take a week off, and I'll see you in 3 weeks. And that's the gist of it. I was there for over 37 years after that. So Martinez is a beautiful place. Shell's been a great neighbor. And I hope it lasts for another 100 years.
Oh, nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Trudy Hicks. I lived in Martinez. I was born and raised here. In 1946, I was born in the community hospital, and I went to all the schools around here in Martinez. I went to John Muir Junior High, Martinez Elementary, John Muir, and Alhambra High School. I graduated in 1964, but when I moved out to Fairview, I was 2, and when I could walk or talk, I said, this is the stinky plant that we live by, because it smelled. I said, what is that smell? And it was the gas and whatever else they were making, but I lived there until I was 18, moved away, and I've come back, and I've lived here again for 27 years. And I like the community. Did I say I was born in community hospital?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's exciting that I'm a native of Martinez. And I did move away for 20 years and come back because I like Martinez.
Mm-hmm.
And now I just live up the street on Bush Street.
Nice.
Yeah, so we live on Bush Street in Martinez, and that's really nice too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know people that have worked at Shell or?
His brother, um, Wesley Hicks. He worked there for a while. Yeah.
Wonderful. Have you
Yeah.
been on the tour yet of the
No,
refinery?
we haven't.
It's very interesting.
Is it very
Yeah,
interesting?
it's very cool. Went there first time, so.
Oh, and then also I was able to walk up on the overpass that they were building for the freeway in the 60s.
What's, Highway 4 or 680?
680,
Okay.
the Benicia Martinez Bridge. I got to see that being built, and then I got to walk on it before they were finished. My dad and I walked up on it
I'll teach them.
when no one was around. Yeah.
They have a decades reunion coming up for the
Oh.
high school, for Alhambra High School.
Yeah.
Sometime in August, I think.
August. Yeah. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. To see who's still around here.
That's right.
Who moved away.
Okay, well,
That's it.
that's it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Earl Pitts. I grew up in Pittsburgh and graduated Pittsburgh High, and the very next day I was in Marine Corps boot camp. When I got out, I had met my wife, and we moved to, my wife June, and we moved to Martinez, and we've been here about 30 years. And plus, I was born here. Let's see, I was a union roofer, and it got real slow back in the 80s, and I knew somebody that worked here, and he got me in here as a carpenter, building scaffolding, a stage rigger. And I did that off and on for close to 2 years, just during shutdowns. Seen a lot of amazing things in here, and climbed a lot of towers, a lot of flare towers, and it was really, really interesting, and had a really good time here.
Good place to work, huh?
A great place to work. And I was 1 year from being vested in the union to get my retirement and my pension, and I was going to sacrifice all that if they hired me here, and because they were looking for permanent carpenters, and I guess a couple other guys had more experience and did it longer than me, and they hired them. But anyway, I went back to roofing and finished my career in that, and retired from that, and but had a lot of fun at Shell, and it was a blast, seeing a lot of things. The one thing I remember is there's a bridge you go over, and they had these, I think they were some kind of pumps, and they were made in Germany, I think during the war, and I believe they had like SWAT stickers on them, some kind of German emblem, and that I remember the most. But it was fun. It was fun.
So it was a perfect thing for you, coming from roofing, to start to building scaffolding, huh?
To building
It was
scaffolding.
a good fit for you.
Yeah. So, and I learned a lot. I worked on the coker for 4 months. Probably the first week, we were about 2 stories up in LOP, and they asked me to go out, and we were going to build a cantilever, and they asked me to go out on the outside of the scaffold we started to build straight up, and I'm like, there's no way you're going to put me out doing a cantilever 2-3 stories up. Within a month or 3 weeks, I was hanging off the top of the coker, which is about 18 stories up, just with a safety harness, building a cantilever, and it was no sweat then.
So, but you had been into roofing. Why was that difficult for you to do this high thing?
Because I never hung off of the edge of 18 stories like that. The highest I'd ever been was maybe 4 stories up on a steep roof with these toe boards, and there was scaffolding around it, and there was nothing ever like being on the top of the coker hanging over the side like that. And that was really, really interesting.
What a view, huh?
What a view. We were lucky that it did have an elevator and we didn't have to walk the stairs.
Okay.
So that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Russ Holt. I've lived in Martinez since 1939. My father was a chemical engineer with Shell Oil, and it's been it. We've just been around town all the time.
And what were you doing? You had some history here in terms of when you were 12 or 14 years old.
Oh yeah, when I was a young kid, 12, 14, somewhere in that vicinity, I used to set pins here at the Shell Clubhouse. They have a 2-lane bowling alley downstairs. Tommy McGowan ran the place. They had 3 pool tables, and so when I wasn't setting pins, I was playing pool.
That's great. They had a lot of activities here for the families of the Shell.
Yes, they
employees.
did.
Did you participate in those?
No, my mom and dad were quite into square dancing and folk dancing, and they did a lot of that here. And I can remember coming down here, if I was looking for my mom and dad, because we just lived 2 blocks from here, and come down to the clubhouse and watch them dance. They always said it was really good for them because of good exercise.
Yes. So your dad worked at Shell.
Yes,
And what was his position?
he was a chemical engineer.
He was the chemical engineer.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right.
So,
Do you remember the bunny rabbit, the Easter rabbit, and the Santa Claus that they had for the?
no.
Okay.
What was that?
Well, the Shell employees.
Oh, okay.
Anyway.
Yeah.
During those seasons. Okay.
Yeah, I worked at Shell as summer labor. When I got out of the high school, I graduated from high school at 18, and I had signed up for the Air Force, and I was going to go into the Air Force in October. And so I got on a summer labor out here. Pretty good deal, making some pretty good money for the time. And it taught me one thing, that I didn't want to be a laborer for the rest of my life.
What did they have you doing?
Oh, jackhammer, digging ditches, tying up ships with the wharf, cleaning out tanks, just anything that nobody else wanted to do, basically. And hoeing weeds. We did a lot of weeds.
Okay.
Anything-
So that was your summer, but then you didn't work for Shell after that.
No, I never worked I came out of the Air Force and got on at Mare Island. I was working over there. So
Okay. Thank you. Name so that we know.
Got it.
Okay.
This is Tom Peters. I was a friend of Linda Crow, who told me a wonderful story that relates to Shell's history. Her uncle, or perhaps it was her great uncle, I believe the story went, had been hired at Shell, and one of his jobs, collateral jobs, not his whole job, was to make sure that the siren, the noon siren, ran at exactly the right time, the noon whistle. And when he took over this job from somebody, they explained to him how everything worked, and he said, well, now, how do I know what time it is? How do I set the time? And they said, well, there's a chronometer in the front window of the jeweler on Main Street, and that has the exact time. So that's how you do it. So he did that and had this job, and used that once in a while to make sure it was right on. And one day, everything went fine. One day he was going by the shop and he saw the dealer and the jeweler doing something to the chronometer, and he stepped inside and asked him about the chronometer, how they set that so accurately. And he says, well, every day at noon they blow the whistle up the hill at Shell.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, all right then.
I love it. I don't care if it's true or not, I love it.
That's a great story. And do you live in Martinez currently?
I live in Martinez currently, up on Harbor View,
Harborview. How long have you lived here?
since 1979. And I did live down on Escobar, which is quite close to the refinery. Love Martinez.
Love Martinez. Good. All right. Thank you.
My name is Paul Krantz, and I have lived in Martinez all of my life. My father was an employee of the Shell Oil Company, and so was my grandfather. I find that kind of interesting that when my grandfather died, my father had to drop out of college. My grandfather was Rudolph Krantz, and my father's name was Antone, but he went by Tony Krantz. And when his father died, he was forced to leave college and come home and take care of my grandmother and the family business, which was a little grocery store on Pacheco Boulevard, 2820 Pacheco. It's now a laundromat. And Shell offered him his father's job. And this would have been in 1936. And since it wasn't likely he was going to be able to go back to college, he took the job, and he worked there for 25 years until he passed away very young at age 46. So my memories of Shell are basically sitting at the south gate as a young child waiting for my dad to come down the hill. And frankly, going into the plant for the first time in my life at 62 years old, I was a little emotional about that.
I can imagine.
Because the road is still there, you know, that he used to walk down. And I'd stand there and wait with my nose pressed to the chain link waiting for him. And then run over and meet him at the in the building where they had to punch the time clock coming out. And then I get to go in the locker room with him while he changed, usually just boots, got out of his boots and into some normal shoes and washed a little bit, and we left.
That must have been really nice for him too, to see you there each time.
Sure.
Nice way to end his day.
Well, it was a product of you know, the late 50s, early 60s, when families typically didn't have more than one car. And so when my dad was at work, my mother had the car, and vice versa. That's pretty much all I have to say, other than Shell has been obviously a wonderful neighbor to the community. Besides being responsible for much of the growth in the community and much of the construction that went on in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, when they were trying to get workers here. They now are major supporters of nonprofits. I run the countywide senior nutrition program, including Meals on Wheels, and Shell has always been very supportive of that. One of their staff is on our board, and they've always made the Shell Clubhouse available to us for fundraisers and donor appreciation events and that sort of thing. And then, of course, I'm also on the board of the Martinez Historical Society, and Shell has always been a major partner in that.
Mm-hmm. That is very true. Yeah, very good community, very good neighbors.
And I want to take credit for my fence.
Yes, the beautiful fence that now surrounds the clubhouse. That was Paul's idea.
Thank you.
Yes. it was very
I'm not letting anybody forget that.
I know.
I don't know that I have caused a physical change in Martinez that had as much impact as I think that did, and I'm very proud of that. I sort of kept that one under my belt until there was a good opportunity to propose it. If somebody's watching this further down the road, the issue was that the fence around the Shell Clubhouse, of course, is a beautiful, almost looks like an antebellum type home. Kind of looks like a plantation home in the South, and it was surrounded by a rusty chain link fence with barbed wire on top. Now, of course, the plant has to maintain security, and so they had to be able to close a gate and shut it down and make sure it's secure, because it's part of the perimeter of the plant. But when we were asked to take a tour and comment on the perimeter of the plant, I had been sitting on the idea for a while that they really needed to tear down that fence and put up a wrought iron fence that was more in keeping with the beauty of the building, because it really is quite a nice structure. So I'm pleased with that, and
Nice job.
I will take credit for that.
Yes, it's very respectful of the building. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Paul.
You bet.
Is it me now? Okay, hi, I'm Olin Skinner. Everybody calls me Butch. I'm 53 years now in Martinez. I grew up on Arthur Road out in the Vine Hill area. One of the things I remember about Shell Oil is in 1980, I graduated Alhambra High School, and in 1978, I believe, I took the Shell Oil Automotive Professional Training Program, which was sponsored by Shell Oil at the high school. And we learned how to run a Shell gas station, basically, back when Shell actually had gas stations, where they were all Shell gas stations. No, I've always thought Martinez, Shell's been a good neighbor to Martinez. There's been incidents that happened, but they took, quick efforts to make things good. And I've had a lot of friends who've worked here a long time, and I have always felt they were a good neighbor in Martinez.
Yes.
But,
And so that class was offered at Alhambra High School?
at Alhambra High School, actually, and I don't know if it's true, but we had a really outrageous auto shop. We had a couple lifts and an alignment rack, and we were told that most of that was sponsored by Shell Oil. And,
Yeah, they've been very generous with the community. Probably was.
oh, I think our computers were too, because in 1980 we just started with the PCs. And the few PCs we had, I think, were supplied by Shell Oil. I couldn't guarantee all that, but that was my earliest thing. I remember I even learned how to run a credit card machine, and we did the basic automotive maintenance. We had auto shop, and the auto shop class, like I said, was sponsored by them also. So.
I believe it still is an award-winning auto shop.
Oh, you know what? I bet it is. I bet it is. And my dad, Bill Skinner, worked at Shell Oil as an operator, but it was in the 50s. And he quit that to become an underground man, and I've followed his steps, and I'm an underground man myself.
What is an underground man?
We install pipelines. I install water mains, actually, in the East Bay Mud area. But yeah, we do water distribution. And with my father, we did water, sewer, storm. But
So you followed in his footsteps?
I followed in my father's footsteps.
Nice.
And then we shut down in the early 80s, and then as for chance, in 1989, I miss my dad.
Yeah.
Get me started.
Yeah. Good guy.
We worked at Shell Oil as Boilermakers on Turnaround 89 for the Dillingham Corporation. And that's about it.
Hi, I'm Sean Morris. I'm a pipe fitter here in Shell Martinez. And this is my oldest, Dylan Morris, and my youngest, Brody Morris. I live in Benicia, California, and I love working here in your guys' town in Martinez. I enjoy coming to work. It's actually safer here than me working at home.
How long have you been a pipe fitter?
I've been a pipe fitter for probably about 20 years working in the industry. Became a journeyman pipe fitter probably about 10 years ago.
Here at Shell?
No, I started working here in Shell in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Good place to work, huh?
oh, I love it. It's a good place to call home.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, a lot of people mention about how safe it is here, too.
Yeah, we got a lot of steps in process before we even crack open up anything. We pretty much do a lot of safety stuff.
That's good. Have your sons been on the tour of the refinery, or can they do that maybe not old enough?
Right after this,
Right after this, good.
Yep.
It's pretty cool. You'll like it.
so they get to see where their dad works every day.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Benjamin Solomonier. I'm a resident of of local Bay Area. I've lived in this area my entire life. I recently got my Eagle not that long ago, and Shell offered to let me use their hall for my Eagle Court, and thanks to them I can invite all my friends and family that have helped me through the years come that normally I wouldn't be able to invite because this is the only place around that has enough room, and Shell offered to give it to me.
So nice. And what was your Eagle project?
I built a trail over Markham Park in Concord. It was an add-on to one of my friend's Eagle projects, actually. And I finished it. He was originally going to finish that off, but they told him he can't, and they gave me the project to finish it off. And I also cleaned the local creek in the area. So.
Nice. So it involved paving stones or fences, or what did that involve?
Well, the trail, we started with just marking it out and like with sticks that we just found in the area, and then we just took tan bark and started just wheelbarrowing it to the areas and raking it out, and it took a good 8 hours to do.
A lot of work.
And plus we had a second project going on cleaning up the creek, so.
What creek was that? Somewhere in Concord?
It was in this park as well. It recently rained that day, so that last night, so it was full of water while we were doing it.
So now you're going to have your Eagle Court at the Shell Clubhouse.
Yes.
Cool. Did you go in and have you been inside the?
Not yet.
Oh,
Nope.
it's a lovely place and very roomy and a big kitchen. So hope you have food for your guests.
Oh yes.
All right. Anything else you want to add?
No.
All right, Ben. Thank you.